Jack_Daggett7 wants to know, can positioning yourself to the right or the left of the rubber affect your mechanics, velocity, etc.? So remember, mechanics can affect velocity, right? So the setup being that if you're like far right, far left, center cut, you got to think about like rotation and your brain's understanding of body's timing to complete the task. I have a video screening on this. I had a client that was struggling with early trunk rotation, but he was setting up like far glove side on the rubber. So his early trunk rotation was actually being initiated by his setup, because his brain was like, yo, we gotta rotate early, because if we don't, we're gonna be late. We're gonna cut ourselves off. Always look at like rotation, especially within cervical rotation, like the eyes and what you're looking at, because unless there's a big drastic compensation over time, that then your compensation just becomes your movement pattern. But usually with like where your eyes are, your body is going to then compensate to make it where you know where you're expressing this energy. You can see where you're expressing this rotational energy, right? So yes, go to my YouTube. Setup on the rubber can influence mechanical breakdowns, I think is what it's called, but I could be wrong. Maybe if you just look in the mechanical screenings or analysis screenings folder, you'll find it. But to answer your question simply, Jack, yes, it can affect your mechanics. It's just there's just compensation. And remember, like, not all compensation is like bad, right? But it can influence a little bit different timing and a little bit different positioning. It's just about finding the right one. You know, I think I use the setup, and you can probably read more about this in my ebook that is now finally released on my website, therobbyroshow.com/ebooks, that I have a whole chapter on setup and some of the things that I'm looking for within setup. And the biggest thing with setup is influencing a solid initial move. And a lot of times within guys' setup is they don't quite accomplish that. They're in a more of an unathletic stance. They're positioned too cut off to where then the body can even establish some sense of tempo and rhythm. So always think about that, I would say. And think about another layer to this is your release point. What do you struggle with in terms of like your pitching? Is it, command, velocity, consistency, health? There's a lot of things there that we could take, peel back a layer and see, okay, you're struggling with consistency in the release shot. Well, let's set up in such a way that now when you're positioned at ball release with your fingers, it's more of center, like it's splitting home plate in half. So for righties, you're going to probably set up far left side. Lefties are going to be far right side, and position your hand where it's center. And there doesn't have to be a whole lot of manipulation going on in terms of how long you're holding onto the ball. You're maybe cutting the ball, thinking that you have to get glove side extension. Your ball's arm side elevated because you're under the ball, because you had to kind of early rotate and then push your shoulder up. There's a lot of things to it, and obviously it's hard to paint a picture, but yeah. Ebook. It's got a whole page on that. Good question.